There was a rocker by the kitchen window, the one with the worn place on the left arm where my thumb had rubbed the finish clean away, and I was sitting in it that spring evening with my daughter at my breast, 3 months old and not half finished. The window was open a hand's width. The lilac by the porch rail had come out that week, and the whole kitchen smelled of it, and of the ham I had put on at 4 o'clock. Then his boots came up the porch steps, and the second board went hollow under him the way it always did, because it had never been fixed. I set her down. Half fed in the cradle by the stove, and she made that small breaking sound she made when she was not done with me, and I was already on my feet, wiping my hands down my apron, before the door had even swung. I was 22 years old. It was my second year married, and I could not have told you then, and did not learn for a long while after, which one of them I had really set down first. I married Amos in November, in my mother's front room with the partition taken out and the benches carried in off the bench wagon, and I was 20 years old, and could not have been given anything better if you had handed me the county. He was steady, and he was kind, and he did not talk a great deal, which suited me fine, because I did not talk a great deal either. We took the small place on the far side of his father's land, a house with a good south window over the sink, and a buggy shed that leaned a little toward the east and had leaned that way, they told me, since before he was born. His mother came and stayed with us that first week to help me learn the stove, which drew hot on one side and sulked on the other. She was a good woman. I want that said before anything else in this, because she was a good woman, and she never once raised her voice to me in all the years I knew her. On the third evening, she was standing at my elbow while I was still cutting bread, and she said it the way you would say that the frost was coming, or that the peas wanted planting. A wife is up, and the table half set, before his boots crossed the porch. That was all of it. She did not say it as a warning. She did not say it unkindly. She said it the way she would have handed me a spoon. It was not in the ordnung. I want to be careful there, because people hear that word and think of some thick book with a lock on the cover, and it is nothing of the sort. It is what our district has agreed to, read out twice a year before communion, and it concerns the width of a hat brim and the color of a dress and what machinery a man may keep in his shop. There is not one line in it about a woman's hands. The bishop never said it to me. Nobody ever said it to me but her, once, in a kitchen, over bread. And I took it up the way you take a dish handed across a table. I never once set it down to look at what was in it. I only knew I wanted to be good at this, that I wanted her to go home and tell his sisters that Amos had married a girl who kept a decent house. I did not have a word for it yet. It began with the letter to my sister Katie, who had married out to Indiana and wrote me every third week on lined tablet paper. I had gotten as far as telling her about the hens, boots on the porch, and I laid the pencil down in the fold, and I did not come back to that letter for 11 days. And when I did, I could not remember what I had been going to say about the hens or about anything else. I finished it anyway. I have thought since that half of what I meant to tell my sister those first years is still sitting somewhere in the fold of a tablet, unsaid. Then it was the mending. I would be in the middle of a seam, needle up, and I would hear him at the gate and set the whole basket on the floor beside the chair with the needle still hanging by its thread, and that basket got so it lived on the floor because there was no use putting it up on the shelf when I only had to bring it down again. Then it was my own plate. This is the one I am ashamed to say plainly, because it sounds like so little. I would sit down to eat when he sat down to eat, and then he would want the salt, and then the coffee, and then more bread, and by the time I was back in my chair, the gravy on my plate had gone to a skin. I ate a great many cold suppers in a warm kitchen, and did not think one thing about it. At G. May, it had a shape I could see in other women. We would be in the kitchen after, washing up, and it would come out sideways, the way things do, that so-and-so's man never has to wait a minute, that so-and-so had her table set at 10 of 5 with the lamp already lit. Nobody said it was a contest. Nobody had to. We had all left school at the end of 8th grade and gone straight into our mother's kitchens, and this was the one arithmetic we had all kept up. Whose supper was ready first, whose hands were free first, And I was good at it. That is the part I would rather not tell you. I was proud of it. There was a whole year where I could hear the buggy turn in off the road and be standing with the coffee poured before he had the horse unhitched, and I thought that was love, and I want to be gentle with that girl, because in her way, she meant it as love. I did not have a word for it yet. Our daughter came in the winter, at home, with the midwife and my mother, and a lamp turned low, and she came hard, and she came slow, and afterward I lay in that bed and looked at her, and thought that nothing in my life would ever again be a small thing. But the reflex did not know that. That is the piece I cannot make anyone understand who has not carried one. My mind loved that baby past all sense, and my body had been trained for 2 years, and my body was faster than my mind. She nursed slow. Some do. She would come off and rest and come back, and it took the better part of half an hour to get her full, and every single evening that half hour ran straight into the hour Amos came in from the barn. And every single evening I heard the boots, and I lifted her off, and she would root at the air and make that sound, and I would lay her in the cradle and go put the food on. I would like to tell you I did that once. I did it all spring. I got so I was listening for the porch instead of listening to her, nursing with one ear turned to the window, the way you keep half an ear on a pot that is nearly boiling over. She would fuss an hour later, and I would tell myself she was colicky. Some evenings she went down for the night hungry and woke at 1 and at 3, and I sat with her in the dark and was tired in a way that had gotten into my bones, and I still did not put the two ends of it together. Then one evening in May, I sat there afterward with my hands in the dishwater and did the plain arithmetic of it. In 2 years of marriage, when two things wanted me at the same moment, I could not think of one single time that the other thing had been the one to wait, not the letter, not the seam, not my own plate, and now, not her. If you are listening to this and something in it has gone quiet and familiar in your chest, I would be glad if you stayed with me a while. Subscribe, so these find you, and tell me down in the comments what it was you set down midway and never did get back to. I read them. They are the reason I keep talking. I did not take it to Amos. I want to be honest about why. It was not fear. He had never once in his life said a hard word to me about supper, and that is exactly what made it impossible. Because how do you go to a man and accuse him of something he has never asked for? So on a Thursday, I put the baby in the basket and walked the half-mile up the road to Verna's. Verna was Amos's aunt on his father's side, 71 that year, and she had raised 11 children in a house that never had more than 4 bedrooms in it. She had buried a husband and a boy of 9. She was the one every young wife in that district ended up at eventually, and none of us ever admitted to each other that we had gone. The whole walk up I was rehearsing how I would say it, and every way I tried it sounded like complaining. I had a good man, I had a healthy baby, I had a warm house and a garden already in. What I had come to say was that I had been putting my baby down half-fed for the sound of boots on a porch, and I could already hear how it would come back to me, that I wanted managing better, that I should start supper at 3 instead of 4, that I should feed her earlier, that this was a matter of a young mother not yet having the way of her day. I was half hoping for that, if I am truthful. It would have been the easier thing to be told. Her kitchen smelled of onions and wet wool. She had her cap strings hanging loose the way she wore them in her own house, and she looked at my face at the door for about 2 seconds and did not ask me one question. She said, "Come," sits, and pulled the chair out with her foot and took the baby off me and put her over her own shoulder like she had done it 11,000 times, which she had. Then she poured me coffee out of the pot on the back of the stove, and it had gone stone cold in it, and she set it down in front of me anyway, and sat down across the table with her hands folded. I said, "I think there is something wrong in how I keep my evenings." And I told her about the rocker and the window and the second porch board and the sound my daughter made when I lifted her off, and I got all the way to the end of it, and Verna did not say a word the whole time. She just moved her hand slow on that baby's back. And when I stopped, she looked at the cold cup between my hands for a good while before she looked up at me. She said, "Liwi, whose hunger comes first in this house of yours?" I started to answer her. I had an answer ready, some tidy thing about a man coming in off 14 hours of work and needing his supper hot. She let me get about 4 words out, and then she put her hand flat on the table, not hard, just flat. She said, "No, think on it. You have spent 2 years teaching that baby that hers can wait. Who taught her that? Not the bishop, not the ordnung, not the Lord God, who fed people first and preached to them after. You did, and somebody taught you. I want you to know that I sat there and could not get air for a moment." Then she told me about that cup. She said, "This pot goes cold in my kitchen near every night, and it has for 50 years, because I used to keep it hot from 4 o'clock on, waiting on a man who came in when he came in." She said, "I had 11 children, and I did the same thing you are doing, and I did it longer, and I did it with better excuses." She said, "I nursed a boy in that corner there and set him down for the sound of a door more times than I could count, and I was 46 years old before it ever once occurred to me that the door was not on fire." She said it just like that. The door was not on fire. She said her husband had never asked her for it. Not once, not in any year. He came in tired and he sat down and he was glad of what was there. He had grown up in a house where his mother did it, and he had married a woman who did it, and it never crossed his mind to wonder what it had cost anybody, because it had never cost him anything, and a man does not go looking for a bill that never came to him. That was the whole of it. There was no rule. There was no sin in it either way. It was a habit of the house, handed woman to woman across a kitchen with the bread knife still in her hand, and it had gotten so far into us that we had started teaching it to the babies at our own breasts before those babies could hold their own heads up. Verna said, "He is not an emergency, Liwi. He is your husband. He can stand in a doorway 2 minutes with his hat in his hand while his daughter finishes her supper." And then she said the thing I have carried ever since. She said, "Your girl is learning right now, in that rocker, what a woman's hunger is worth in a house. Whatever you teach her there, she will hand to hers." Nothing loud happened after. I want to be plain about that, because I know how these stories are supposed to go, and mine does not go that way. I walked home with the baby, and I made supper, and I did not say one word to Amos about any of it, not that night, not for years. What changed was about 4 minutes long. The next evening I was in the rocker and she was not finished, and the boots came up on the porch and hit that hollow board, and everything in me stood up, and I stayed sitting down. That is all. I stayed sitting down, and my heart went like I had done something wicked, and I kept my eyes on the top of her head and let her finish. He came in. He hung his hat. He looked at the stove, which had a pot on it that was not yet on the table, and then he looked at the rocker, and he said, "Well?" And he went and washed at the basin, and by the time he was dried, I was up, and it was on the table, and it was hot, and the whole of the difference in that evening was 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 2 years of it, for 5 minutes. After that, I let other things run past his boots too. The seam got finished. The basket went back up on the shelf where it belonged, and there is a letter to my sister Katie from that June that is 4 pages long and says everything I meant to say about the hens, and a good deal more. And here is the part I did not expect. Along about August, I was in the rocker again with her, and I heard him on the steps, and he stopped. He did not call through the screen the way he always had, asking was it ready. He stood out there on the porch a minute with his hand on the rail, looking off at the buggy shed leaning east, and then he came in quiet and sat down at the table and waited. He never asked me why. I never told him. But he learned it off me the same way I had learned the other thing off his mother, out of the air of a kitchen, without one word spoken about it. I am not young now, and I have watched a lot of women come up in that district, and I have seen the look on a new wife's face when she hears the gate and her hands start moving before she has decided anything. So I will say to you what Verna said to me, and I will try to say it as gently as she did. Your child's hunger was never meant to come second to a man's boots on a porch. Neither was the letter you were writing. Neither was your own plate, going cold in front of you in a warm kitchen while you got up for the salt. And I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to make this about a bad man, and it was not a bad man. Amos worked himself gray for us. The men in our houses were handed an expectation the same as we were, out of the air, at their mothers' tables, and the difference is that theirs cost them nothing, so they never once thought to open it up and look inside. That is not cruelty. It is not asking. It is a whole community of good people carrying something none of them made and none of them ever weighed. We are the ones who can weigh it. That is not rebellion, and it is not pride, and it is nothing the bishop needs to hear about. It is a woman sitting still in a rocker for 4 more minutes while a baby finishes, and letting a good man stand in his own doorway with his hat in his hand. For 2 years I could not have told you what was wrong in me. I only knew I was tired in a way that sleep did not touch, and I thought that was what being a wife was. I have a word for it now. There is more to this than I can fit in one sitting. What Verna told me about her 9-year-old boy, and what happened the winter my daughter turned 6 and set her own doll down at the sound of a door, and what I finally said to Amos, 21 years late. I wrote it all down, the way it happened. It is a small book, and the link is in the description below and in the first pinned comment, if you would like to sit with the rest of it in your own quiet. Take it if it is yours to take, and read it slow. Thank you for staying with me tonight. Be gentle with yourselves and finish what is in your hands.